I fell in love with my daughter's father again. Oh my god, fire! Yelled our daughter. I was in the middle of framing my perfect comeback to my ex-husband's sarcasm when the flower arch behind us burst into fire. The chaos was soon followed by angry shouting from my daughter. Great, as if the presence of my ex-husband wasn't enough. Now we're gonna burn down our daughter's wedding too. About half an hour ago. Despite my reluctance, the floral arch looked nothing less than a Pinterest nightmare. I glared at Cameron. The man had a gift for annoying me. It was almost impressive. Every time I see you, I feel like I'm staring at a walking midlife crisis, I shot at him, arms crossed. He smirked, adjusting the ridiculous beret perched atop his long black hair. And every time I see you, I think, wow, that's what happens when workaholic meets disaster. Touché, I muttered, picking up a flower. At least my crisis doesn't involve pretending to be an artist. Pretending? He gasped, feigning shock. Coming from a guy whose wardrobe screams corporate museum. What's your excuse, Michael? Too many boring meetings? Better than living in a paint-splattered warehouse, I retorted, tossing the flower back. How's that gallery of yours doing? Still attracting tumbleweeds? He laughed, but it lacked any warmth. At least I have passion. What do you have? A stack of legal briefs? Oh, and about the wedding budget. Did you even look at it? Budget? You mean the one you inflated with those overpriced centerpieces? I thought we were planning a wedding, not funding a small nation, I snapped, throwing up my hands. Please, those centerpieces are art. Do we really want Ileana's wedding to look like it came from a dollar store? He shot back, his eyes narrowing. Hey, staying on a budget doesn't always downgrade things. Besides, you're the one who insisted on hiring a live band instead of a DJ. Did you want to give her a heart attack with your terrible taste in music? Terrible taste? I'll have you know my taste in music is impeccable. My friends agree, Ileana agrees, and so does Marcus. You're the one with an issue. Maybe it's your taste that we all should be questioning here, Cameron declared, puffing out his chest like he just won an award. Right. If by friends you mean a few hipsters who think drinking herbal tea makes them profound. He stepped closer. At least I have friends. How many of your colleagues will show up? Oh, right. Too busy counting their money. Better than being surrounded by people who think just by covering things in pastels, they can make it all better, I shot back, gesturing to the arc of pale flowers behind him. What's wrong with pastels? They're lovely, Cameron exclaimed, but I could hear the annoyance creeping in. Lovely? More like a candy factory exploded. This is a wedding, not a toddler's birthday party. Just as he opened his mouth to retort, his elbow knocked into a candle. I watched in slow motion as the candle wobbled, danced, and then toppled over into the flowers. Cameron! I yelled, lunging forward, but it was too late. The flames erupted from the flower arrangement, covering the whole arch within seconds. What did you do? He shouted, eyes wide. Me? You're the one who knocked it over, I snapped, grabbing a nearby tablecloth, waving it futilely at the flames. You're making it worse, he screamed, snatching the tablecloth from my hand. You really have to just let everything burn to the ground, he hollered, finally grabbing a fire extinguisher. A cloud of foam sprayed out, dousing the flames but covering me in a layer of white. I looked like I just stepped out of a snowstorm, and not the glamorous kind. Congratulations! You've turned me into a walking marshmallow, I hissed, shaking my head. Still looks better than whatever you had going on before, he smirked. Before I could say anything to wipe that smug smile off his face, Ileana stormed in, eyes wide in anger. What the hell is going on here? Are you two seriously going to ruin my wedding with your fighting? I started, but she cut me off. No, I don't want to hear it, Dad. I can't believe you're both acting like children right now. This is supposed to be my wedding stage, not a circus. I opened my mouth, ready to defend our latest argument, but Ileana's expression stopped me. She looked genuinely upset. Do you have any idea how much stress this is causing me? She said, hands on her hips. You both need to get it together, or I swear. Cameron and I exchanged a glance, both of us momentarily silenced by her fury. Fine, I said, finally relenting. We'll figure it out. Good, Ileana said, crossing her arms, because I can't handle any more drama today. As she stormed off, I sighed, turning back to Cameron. He nodded, looking more serious now. Yeah, right. Let's try not to set anything else on fire. Later that evening. It had been hours since the accident, but I hadn't been able to shake the disappointed look on Ileana's face. She was right. This wedding was supposed to be about her, not our petty bickering. I took a deep breath, deciding to go find Cameron. We needed to talk. On my way to his room, I spotted Cameron on his way to somewhere, looking just as deep in thought. "Hey," I said, trying to keep it casual. "Hey," he replied, pushing off the wall. I was just coming to find you." "Well, I guess we both have been thinking the same thing," I said, a hint of relief washing over me. "I think we should talk about how we've been handling things. We need to get it together for Ileana." "Right," he nodded. "But do you really think we can just magically fix everything?" "I don't expect magic, but we can't keep arguing like this," I replied, hoping to sound more convincing than I felt. "Yeah, well, you make it pretty easy when you keep pushing my buttons," Cameron snapped, arms crossed. "It's like you enjoy driving me crazy." "Enjoy? Please, if I wanted to be annoyed, I'd watch paint dry," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "But seriously, this fighting is ridiculous." "Ridiculous? You're the one who keeps tearing down my ideas," Cameron's voice edged higher. "Maybe if you actually listened instead of reacting, we wouldn't be in this mess." My temper flared. "Oh, so now it's all my fault, just because I have an opinion." "That's not it, but every time I suggest something, you shut it down without thinking," he snapped, his frustration obvious. "Maybe that's because I actually care about our daughter's wedding," I yelled, my voice bouncing off the walls. "Are you actually trying to say that you're the only one who cares about it?" Cameron threw his hands up. "God, Michael, you can't bulldoze your way through this like one of your court cases." "Me? I'm the one trying to—" "Enough," he shouted, cutting me mid-sentence. "We need to stop this, seriously." I paused, the intensity of his words hitting me. "You're right. We're going in circles, but we can't keep acting like this." "Then let's actually talk about it. No more arguing, no more insults, just talk," he said, his tone softening a bit. "Fine, let's sit down somewhere. I'll grab a drink, and we can try to hash this out like adults," I suggested, wanting to break the tension. "Sounds good," he replies, and for a moment, it felt like we might actually make progress. We walked toward the bar area, got our drinks, and settled into a quiet corner. "I just want Ileana to have the perfect wedding," I said, finally breaking the silence. "She deserves it after everything we put her through." "Yeah, me too," Cameron agreed, taking a sip of his drink. "But it feels like we keep messing things up with our fighting. She shouldn't have to deal with that." "Exactly. I know I can be overbearing sometimes, and I want to change that," I admitted. "But I need you to be open too." "Open? You mean like how you've been so open about dismissing my ideas?" he replied, the sarcasm creeping back into his voice. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Look, I'm trying to be better. Just help me out here. Let's find common ground instead of just hurling insults." "All right, I'll try, but you've got to meet me halfway. I'm not asking for the moon here, just some respect for my input," he said, the tension easing slightly. "Respect. Got it," I nodded, hoping this time it would stick. But before we can get too comfortable, our conversation veered back to old habits. "And by the way, your taste in music is still terrible," he smirked. "Please, coming from the guy who thinks abstract art is a splash of paint on canvas," I shot back, unable to resist. "Touché, but let's save the bickering for later. We have a wedding to plan," he said, shaking his head with a slight smile. "Agreed," I replied, a hint of grin creeping on my face. Maybe we weren't completely hopeless after all. The next evening. Despite everything, the next day was just as chaotic as the day before. Ileana was pacing the living room like a caged animal, glancing at her watch every few seconds. "Dad, we're going to be late," she exclaimed, her voice rising with each tick of the clock. I know, I said, trying to keep my cool. "But we can't leave without Cameron. He's supposed to be here any minute." "Any minute? It's been 20 minutes, she huffed, running a hand through her hair. "Relax, he's probably just taking a little longer to get ready," I replied, though I could feel my own nerves creeping in. After another round of impatient pacing, I decided to go check on him. I stepped out into the hallway hoping to find him on his way. As I approached his room, I could hear muffled sounds from inside. "Cameron," I called, knocking lightly on the door. "You in there?" "Yeah, just a minute," he shouted back, but his voice sounded strained. I opened the door slowly, and what I found made me chuckle despite my anxiety. Cameron was standing in front of the mirror, a look of sheer frustration on his face. He was tangled up in his tie, the fabric looping around his neck like a nose. Need a hand? I couldn't help but smirk. It was like old times. Cameron, the artist, somehow unable to master the basics of dressing up. Very funny, Michael, he replied, rolling his eyes, but unable to hide the hint of a smile. I thought I could do this without your help, but clearly I was wrong. Clearly, I said, stepping closer. Here, let me help you out. I moved behind him, and as I reached around to untangle the tie, I couldn't help but notice how close we were. It was just like old times, and I was so close to him. I could feel the heat radiating off him, and for a moment I was transported back to the days when this kind of closeness was common for us. Hold still, I instructed, focusing on the knot. It felt strangely natural to be this close again, the scent of his cologne mixing with the faint smell of his aftershave. Thanks for doing this. I swear, I've tied this thing 1,000,000 times, but I guess today just isn't my day, he said, his voice low. Don't sweat it. You should see me trying to tie my shoelaces. It's a disaster, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. As I worked on the tie, I felt his breath hitch slightly, and I glanced up to meet his gaze. For a brief moment, the world around us faded away. It was just the two of us caught in this bubble of familiarity and something deeper. There, all set, I said, finally finishing the knot and stepping back to admire my work. You look decent. Decent? Wow, high praise coming from you, he chuckled, adjusting the tie a bit more to his liking. I couldn't help but smile. You know what I mean, just don't forget to breathe this time. It's a party, not a funeral. Right, just trying to make a good impression for my daughter, he replied, looking more relaxed now. Trust me, you'll do just fine. Just be yourself. Ileana loves you. There it was, an old habit, a naked truth, ready to slip off my tongue again. It's not like it wasn't true anymore. We did love him, I think, but I wasn't allowed to say it out loud anymore. Cam was looking into my eyes, probably thinking the same thing when Ileana burst into the room, her eyes wide with panic. Dad, are you seriously still in here? The cars are waiting. On our way, I called back, sharing a quick glance with Cameron before stepping out. The moment lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. A few hours later, the party on the cruise was in full swing. The deck was alive with music, laughter, and the soft clinking of glasses. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. Ileana and Marcus were mingling with friends, while Cameron had somehow charmed half the guests with his usual easygoing demeanor. Even I, the workaholic lawyer, who could never quite relax, found myself enjoying the evening with Marcus's parents. A little while later, I leaned against the railing, taking in the cool evening breeze, when I felt a light tap on my shoulder. You actually looked relaxed for once, Cameron's voice came from behind me, his usual teasing tone laced with something softer tonight. Shocking, right? I figured I'd take a break from worrying about the centerpieces for 5 minutes, I replied, chuckling. He leaned beside me, glancing out at the water. Not bad, huh? I was about to respond with some witty remark when my foot slipped on a slick patch of the deck. One moment I was standing there, minding my business, and the next I was tumbling over the side of the railing. Panic gripped me as I plunged into the water. The cold shock hit me like a punch, and before I knew it, I was sinking. I thrashed around, but it was no use. I didn't know how to swim. My lungs burned as I struggled, trying to desperately keep my head above water. I couldn't focus on anything except the overwhelming terror of sinking. The sounds of the party faded into a distant hum, and I was dimly aware of shouts from above. Then, through the haze of fear and splashing water, I saw a figure diving in after me. Cameron. It all happened so fast. One moment, I was sure I was going under, and the next he was there, grabbing me with strong, familiar hands, his face determined, panic flashing in his eyes as he held on to me. I was still flailing, but he kept his grip steady, trying to keep me above water. Michael, stop fighting! I've got you, he shouted, but my panic had taken over. Suddenly, the rescue team from the boat appeared. They worked quickly, pulling us both out of the water. I gasped as I was lifted onto the deck, my body shivering uncontrollably from the cold and adrenaline. Before I could even process what had happened, Cameron collapsed next to me, soaking wet and out of breath. Without thinking, he reached over and pulled me into a tight hug. His body was shaking just as much as mine, and I could feel the rapid beat of his heart against my chest. Are you okay, Michael? Michael, are you okay? He asked, his voice hoarse with worry. His grip on me was hard, like he was afraid to let go. I was still in shock, but I managed to nod. Yeah, I'm fine, I stammered, trying to still catch my breath. He held me for a moment longer, his face buried in my shoulder. God, you scared the hell out of me. Before I could say anything else, Ileana and the rest of the family rushed over, their faces filled with concern. Dad, are you all right? What happened? Ileana asked, her voice high with panic. I'm okay, I said, giving them a weak smile. Just a little fall, that's all. The rest of the family crowded around, asking questions and making sure I was all right. The rescue team assured everyone that it was just a scare, but that didn't stop Ileana from fussing over me like I just survived a shipwreck. But even with all the noise and all the people, I couldn't stop thinking about Cameron, how he jumped in without hesitation, how he held on to me, terrified but refusing to let go, and how, when we were finally safe, he had hugged me like he never wanted to lose me again. I glanced over at Cameron, who was now wrapped in a towel, standing near the railing where everything had happened. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I knew he understood all that I wanted to say in that moment. He cared. He still cared. As much as we fought and argued, beneath it all, Cameron still had my back, and maybe, just maybe, that was something I'd been missing all this time. Not just his presence, but the way he had always cared, even when we were at our worst. I took a deep breath and walked over to him. Thanks for saving me, I said, my voice quiet but sincere. Cameron looked at me, his expression softening. I'd jump in 1,000 times if I had to. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. There was a weight to his words and that I hadn't expected. It wasn't just a flippant comment, it was real. He meant it. Why? I found myself asking before I could stop myself. He stared at me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Because you matter to me, Michael. You always have. The words hung in the air between us, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't know what to say. All I could do was nod, my throat tight with emotions I wasn't ready to face. We stood there in silence for a while, the distant sound of others fussing around, but for me, the only thing that mattered was the man standing beside me, the man who, despite everything, had never stopped caring. 2 days later. The wedding rehearsal had been going smoothly, almost too smoothly. Ileana was laughing, Marcus was teasing her, and for a moment, even Cameron and I were part of the easy happiness. It felt like old times before the divorce, before all the tension between Cameron and me. The three of us sharing a laugh like nothing had ever changed. Cameron stood next to me, the smile on his face mirroring mine as we watched Ileana dance around in excitement, her dress fluttering in the breeze. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this light, this in the moment, and then like clockwork my phone buzzed. A glance at the screen told me it was work. Of course it was work. I hesitated just for a second, but habit won out. I need to take this, I said, stepping away from the group, already answering the call. Ileana didn't say anything, but the way her smile faltered just a bit was enough. She wasn't happy about it, even if she didn't voice it. Cameron didn't say anything either, but I could feel his gaze boring into the back of my head as I walked away. I tried to focus on the call, but the feeling in the pit of my stomach was impossible to ignore. It wasn't even that important, not really, but once you've started down that road, it's hard to stop. I was in the middle of a dry legal conversation when I heard footsteps behind me. Cameron. Really, Michael? He snapped, arms crossed, frustration clear on his face. Now? You couldn't wait until after the rehearsal? I sighed, muttering a quick, I'll call you back, into the phone before hanging up. It was important, I said, but even I knew how weak that sounded. It's always important, isn't it? Cameron's voice was rising, his anger bubbling up like it had so many times before. It was always the same when we were together. Everything took second place to your work. Me, Ileana, we were always second. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the weight of his words. He wasn't wrong. Cam, it's just... No, he cut me off. This was supposed to be about Ileana, about us being here for her, together. But the minute that phone rings, it's like nothing else matters to you. How many times did we fight about this? Before the divorce, during, after? I'm not that guy anymore, I protested, even though, as I said it, I knew that wasn't entirely true. The past was harder to shake than I wanted to admit. Aren't you? Cameron raised an eyebrow, his voice softening, but still full of hurt. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly the same. You think this is going to make up for all those times you chose work over us? I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Cameron was right, and deep down, I knew it. He wasn't just talking about now. This was about all the times I'd put my career ahead of my family, all the times he had tried to make me see it before we fell apart, and I hadn't listened. I trailed off, struggling to find the words. I'm sorry, not just for now, but all those times before. You deserve better. Cameron looked at me, his arms dropping to his sides, his expression shifting from anger to something softer, almost resigned. Michael, I don't need your apology. I need to know that you're here, that you're really here. And that hit harder than anything else he could have said, because he was right. I hadn't been there, not in the way that mattered, not for him, not for Ileana. I'd always told myself I was doing it for them, working hard to provide, but in reality, I'd been absent in all the ways that counted. I swallowed hard, pulling my phone out of my pocket without saying another word. I shut it off, completely. No more buzzing, no more interruptions. Then I did something that surprised both of us. I took Cameron's hand and handed him my phone. What are you doing? Cameron asked, confused. I'm showing you that I'm willing to change, I said quietly. For you, for Ileana. I don't want to be that guy anymore. I'm done letting work come first. Cameron blinked, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the words. I know I can't fix everything, I continued, my voice steady. I know it's going to take more than just turning off my phone to prove it, but I'm here now, and I want to be here, really be here. Cameron's expression softened, his eyes flicking from my face to his pocket where my phone now rested. He let out a small, almost disbelieving laugh. I'll hold on to it, but if you take it back before this wedding's over, I swear, Michael. I cracked a smile, feeling lighter for the first time in a while. You can keep it as long as you want. Cameron's face relaxed into something resembling the guy I used to know, the one I had fallen in love with once upon a time. He wasn't fully convinced, I could tell, but there was hope there. Maybe, just maybe, this was a start. He took a deep breath and shook his head with a half smile. You're unbelievable, you know that? I try, I said, grinning. Now, should we get back to the rehearsal before Ileana kills us both? Cameron chuckled and nodded. Yeah, let's go. And for the record, this is a good start, Michael. I didn't need to say anything more. The next morning, I woke up feeling surprisingly good. Last night's conversation with Cameron played through my mind on a loop. It wasn't perfect, but we made progress. We actually talked, not just bickered. I even managed to turn my phone off without breaking out in a sweat. Maybe there was hope for us yet. I stretched out, thinking this is it. Today was the big day, our daughter's wedding. And for the first time in a while, I felt like I could just enjoy it. The old tension between Cameron and me didn't feel quite as suffocating. But that peace didn't last long. When I stepped outside to grab some coffee, I saw him, Cameron, and he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a tall, attractive guy, maybe in his mid-30s, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that looked like it belonged in a magazine ad. Cameron was smiling, actually smiling at him. Great. I felt an odd twist in my gut. Jealousy. A feeling I hadn't anticipated. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was stupid. After all, we were divorced. He could date whoever he wanted, but something about seeing him with that guy, laughing, standing so close, made me want to punch a wall, or at least knock over a decorative vase. I took a deep breath, telling myself to focus on the wedding, on Ileana. This was her day, but everywhere I went, there they were, chatting in the corner, laughing together by the bar, his arm casually brushing Cameron's. I couldn't help it. I was pissed. Each time I caught sight of them, that jealousy knot in my stomach tightened. It was like the universe had conspired to shove them in my face at every turn. It didn't help that this guy, whoever he was, seemed charming as hell, making it even worse. The way he'd lean in and talk to Cameron, the smile on his face, it grated on my nerves. At one point, I tried to distract myself by helping out with the final wedding preparations, but all I could think about was how Cameron was spending his time with that guy instead of, I don't know, me? Why did it even matter? I didn't want to admit it, but it did, and the more I saw them together, the angrier I got. It wasn't just irritation, it was jealousy, raw and ugly, and I hated that I felt it. A few hours later, I can't believe this is happening, I whispered, glancing over at him. Cameron nodded, his eyes soft as he looked at Ileana. She's perfect. This is it, the final moment. We were to walk our little girl down the aisle. She looked absolutely stunning, all grown up, ready to start the next chapter of her life. I looked at Cam, and for a second, all the jealousy, all the irritation from seeing him with that guy melted away. This was what mattered. Our daughter, the beautiful moment we were about to share. The music started, and it was time. Ileana hooked her arms through ours, and together Cameron and I walked her down the aisle. The crowd rose, but all I could focus on was the three of us. The proud smile on Ileana's face, the way Cameron and I fell into step perfectly beside her. It felt right. As we walked, memories flooded my mind. The day Ileana was born, the first time she took her wobbly steps, her high school graduation, moments Cameron and I had shared together as her dads. This was how it was supposed to be, the three of us. When we reached the altar and let her go, I felt a strange tug at my heart. Ileana was starting her new life, but what about mine? I glanced over at Cameron, who was watching her with the same proud look in his eyes, and it hit me. This was how it was supposed to be. Cameron and I standing here together. He was supposed to be with me, not overconfident doofus who had spent the whole day glued to his side. No, he should be here with me. I knew it wasn't rational. We'd been divorced for 3 years, but in that moment, standing beside him, watching our daughter start her new life, it felt like we should still be a part of each other's lives too. Maybe not just for Ileana, but because we belong together. Cameron glanced at me, catching my eye, and for a split second, there was something there. Something familiar. I wanted to reach out to tell him what I was feeling, but the moment passed, and before I knew it, the ceremony was underway. I stepped back, watching as Ileana and Marcus exchanged vows, my mind still spinning. Cameron should be with me, not that guy. He didn't even know Cameron the way I did. He didn't know his quirks, the way he hummed when he worked, or how he liked his coffee. I pushed the thoughts aside, trying to focus on the ceremony, but that feeling, that realization lingered in the back of my mind. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't let myself fully acknowledge until now. And I wasn't sure what to do about it. About an hour later. Why did he have to dance with him? They looked far too happy and comfortable for my liking. Every laugh, every touch made my stomach churn. I had enough. Without really thinking, I walked up to them, cutting in firmly. Mind if I steal him for a bit? I didn't wait for an answer, just slipped my hand around Cameron's waist and took over his. His date shrugged and stepped back, looking a little too amused for my liking. What are you doing? Cameron asked, raising an eyebrow as we moved together. Dancing, I said a little too tightly. What does it look like? He smirked. More like you're stomping. I didn't care. I focused on the rhythm, or tried to, but it was impossible with him standing there, all calm and unbothered while I was a mess of emotions. My eyes darted over to his so-called date, who was chatting up someone else now, but my irritation still boiled. So, I started trying to sound casual. Your date, what's the deal with him? Cameron blinked at me, amused. What's it to you? I'm just curious, I tried to shrug, though it probably came off stiff. Is he any better than me? Cameron let out a low chuckle. Are you jealous, Michael? Jealous? I scoffed. Please don't flatter yourself. Uh-huh. So this isn't you being jealous. He gave me a teasing grin, clearly enjoying this far too much. We stepped off the dance floor, the tension between us thickening. Why are you in such a hurry to date someone? I demanded, my frustration spilling out. Have you given up on us already? Cameron's face softened, but before he could say anything, his date sauntered over, smirking. Is it working? He asked Cameron mockingly before turning and walking away with a self-satisfied grin. I frowned. What the hell does that mean? What's working? Cameron sighed, shaking his head. He's not my date, Michael. I stared at him confused. What? He's just a friend from work, Cameron explained, clearly holding back his laughter now. He thought it'd be funny to pretend to be my date and see if it made you jealous. I blinked, completely thrown. Wait, what? You planned this? I didn't plan it, Cameron raised his hands defensively. He came up with the idea. I didn't think it would actually work. Embarrassment flooded me, and I could feel my face heating up. So, this whole time you were just trying to make me jealous? Cameron shrugged, still smiling. Not on purpose, but clearly it worked. I looked down, suddenly feeling incredibly foolish. My voice came out small when I finally spoke. I didn't like seeing you with someone else. Cameron's expression softened again, and he stepped a little closer. Michael, I mean it, I interrupted, feeling the words bubbling up before I could stop them. I hated it. I thought I was fine, but I'm not. I want to be with you again, and this time I'm ready to be better. Cameron stared at me, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Before he could respond, his friend appeared again, clearly enjoying the spectacle. For God's sake, he groaned dramatically, just kiss him, you dumb idiot. I shot him a glare, but before Cameron could tell him off, I acted. Without thinking, I grabbed Cameron by the collar and pulled him toward me, crushing my lips against his. The kiss was intense, passionate, everything I hadn't let myself admit I wanted. His hands grabbed at my shirt, pulling me closer, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. The wedding, the guests, even his obnoxious friend. And it was just us, locked in a kiss that felt like it had been building for years. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, and Cameron looked just as stunned. His friend thankfully had backed off, leaving us alone. So, Cameron said after a long pause, you're ready to be better, huh? I nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, I'm ready. No more games, no more distractions. I'm all in, Cam. If you'll have me. A slow smile spread across his face, and he leaned in, pressing his forehead against mine. You're an idiot, he murmured, but his voice was soft, affectionate. But yeah, I'll have you. And just like that, the knot in my chest loosened. For the first time in a long while, everything felt right. Conclusion. After that kiss, everything clicked. Cameron and I stopped second-guessing and just embraced what we both wanted. Each other. The rest of the night flew by, but I didn't care who saw us together anymore. I even introduced him to a few people properly. No more awkward X label. By the end of the wedding, it was clear we had a fresh start. The past didn't matter. What mattered was that we were finally on the same page, ready to give it another shot, and this time, I knew I wasn't going to mess it up. We were in it for real. The end. Do you believe in a second chance? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.